Hello everybody and welcome to r/ProRevenge, the subreddit where people get what's coming for them. The first story today is by user deleted. Coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I pulled a reverse card. 4 years ago now, when I was 24, my mum died of breast cancer, and as both my grandmothers had also died of it, I saw a specialist for screening. I found out I had some cells in one of my breasts that could have turned cancerous at any given moment. I was told I had a few options. 1. I could have regular screenings every 3 or 4 months until it does develop into cancer. I was told the high risk because of family history, but it could also potentially never turn, so I'd just be getting these screenings for no reason. 2. I could get a single surgery on the breast with the bad cells, but then need to keep an eye on the other one, so I'd still need regular checkups on the other breast. 3. I could get bilateral surgery and remove all of my breast tissue, basically eliminating the risk. I went for the surgery to remove all of my breast tissue. It was admittedly the most drastic option, but after seeing what cancer did to my mum and grandmothers, I didn't want to risk it. I was warned about scarring, but told it should be fairly minor. It wasn't. I was left with 2 huge pink jagged scars on either side of my chest, each about 1 inch long and half an inch wide, and it caused me to go into a severe depression, where it got to the stage of me not even leaving my flat because I didn't want people to see me, throwing out all my mirrors and getting physically sick looking at myself. I went to a therapist who suggested a plastic surgeon. The therapist said they'd never normally do that, but it was clearly something I was struggling with, and I might never get over it. Although I'll admit the therapist did send me to ask about scar reduction, the plastic surgeon suggested a cream, a laser, or implants. The cream didn't work, the laser was both expensive and risky, so I went with the implants. My natural boobs were an F cup, so I went slightly smaller with a double D. Since then, my mental health has improved, I feel a lot better about the way I look, my confidence has gone up, my self-esteem has increased. I know I shouldn't put so much into my appearance, but I wasn't exaggerating about these scars. Huge, bright pink, jagged, raised, just really awful to look at, and I hated seeing myself. And they are now nicely hidden away, and you can barely even feel them. In the present day, I'm 28 years old, and I'm working in an office. I'm doing a lot better than I was. My coworker Jill found out that I'd had a boob job, but not the cancer thing. When myself and my friend from years before the surgery were planning a holiday, and she made a joke about me going on a plane with the implants. Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew that I'd had a boob job, but not why. 6 people all confirmed that Jill was the one who told them. Over the next few months, Jill made many jokes and comments about my chest to co-workers when I was within earshot, at one point saying I had more plastic than Barbie, and calling me fake in 2 ways. I didn't hear this one, but one of my close friends in the office told me Jill had at one point referred to me as a sack of silicone. I don't know what her problem was exactly, but at one point she did mention NHS, so I assume Jill thought that I'd got my tits done for free on taxpayer money. I'd gotten the original surgery on NHS, but gone private for therapy and implants. I asked her to stop more than once, but unfortunately the places I'd talked to her were places like the elevator and the women's bathroom, where there weren't any cameras, and Jill just kept making these comments no matter how often I asked her not to. I wouldn't say it was every single day, but I heard it at least 3 comments every week for 3 months. I hit my breaking point when me, Jill, and a few other co-workers were having lunch. I referred to something as being shallow, and Jill said, "You know all about being shallow," while gesturing to my chest. I snapped. I said, "Do you know why I have these? A few years ago, doctors found potentially cancerous cells in my breast tissue. I was advised to get surgery and was left with huge ugly scars on my chest. I went to see a therapist who referred me to a plastic surgeon who advised me to get implants to hide the scars. And I did, so I could have a look at myself in the mirror without crying. So maybe next time you want to judge someone for having cosmetic surgery, you should ask them why they had it first." And feeling like that was a mic drop moment, I picked up my food and left. For the rest of the day, I had about 1/3 of my office come up and offer support, and the rest tell me that Jill was just joking around and that I was being a bitch. I replied that Jill was being a bitch long before I was. I then got an email from HR saying that they wanted to talk to me the following day, And when I called for clarification, they mentioned a hostile work environment. I knew the person who signed off on the email, and I'd spoken to her. Her name was Debbie. She was one of Jill's friends in HR, so I was fairly confident on who had reported me. I realized that if this was already being sent to HR, I needed as much ammunition as possible, so I went about collecting information. As Debbie had dealt with me so far, it was safe to assume that she would be the person reviewing the complaint with me. And if that was true, I was screwed. However, I vaguely remember a section on the complaints that was in my contract. When I first signed with the company, I flicked through the contract, and there was a part in the complaint section that said I was contractually allowed to request a change of reviewer if I felt my allocated reviewer was biased. It was called an impartial overseer. I photocopied that page, and I highlighted that part. Then I messaged the people that had offered their support over Facebook. I basically said, HR have asked to see me. Do any of you remember Jill insulting me to your face? And are you willing to write or sign something saying what you heard and when? Not everyone was willing to help, seeing as Jill was somewhat feared in the office due to her befriending HR and management, but about 20 people were willing to help me. I guessed roughly when I'd asked Jill to stop previously. The 4 asks over the last few months, some timings were easy to guess, as they'd happened on my break or when I'd first arrived at work, and I wrote them all down, along with rough time of when the lunchroom confrontation happened, and a list of names of who was there for the lunchroom confrontation. I got to work slightly early in the morning. I went round to everyone who had messaged me, but most of them managed to give me a printed signed letter. This isn't exactly the words, as there's 16 letters to sum up, but here's the gist of each letter. My name is their name. I work with Jill, last name, and OP. On date, at time, approximately, I spoke with Jill, last name, during which she referred to OP as, quote, insult. I feel this was inappropriate as it directly related to OP's appearance, and I'm willing to go on record further to establish that Jill, last name, has been discussing OP in the workplace in the same manner for 3 months now, causing me discomfort and creating what I feel is a hostile work environment. Signed, their name. I wound up with about 16 letters, all from different people. One of them was in the lunchroom for all my conversation with Jill. Some had even bullet-pointed lists of everything Jill had said to them about me or other people. As it turns out, Jill had issues with a lot of people's appearances. She'd apparently made comments about one co-worker's weight, something anti-Semitic about a different co-worker's nose, all of which were put in these letters. There were about 45 people in my office, so while 16 wasn't a majority, it's still a decent amount. The letters weren't hugely long, most were only a paragraph, but I had all the necessary information. I was asked to come to HR at 10 a.m. I took the letters from coworkers, the photocopy of the page in my contract, and my dates and times in a little folder with me. I got there, and Debbie was the one overseeing the interview. She got up from her desk, ready to lead me into another room. I immediately turned to the other HR worker that was currently there and said, "So is my meeting with you then?" Debbie said, "No, you're with me." I replied that this would not sit well with me, as my contract clearly states I have the right to an impartial overseer. And as I said this, I took out the contract page. Debbie read it. I wouldn't let her take the paper when there was a shredder so close by, and she said she could be impartial. I replied that I really don't mean to be a pain, but I had it on good authority that the person on the other end of this complaint is her friend. And my contract does say I'm allowed an impartial overseer. Debbie stomped off to get a supervisor. The supervisor came in and asked how I know that she can't be impartial. I tell him that I have it on good authority that Jill, who was on the other end of this complaint, is a close friend of Debbie. He asked Debbie if this was true, to which she only replied with, "I can be impartial." The supervisor took a deep breath, asked for the other HR rep to come with him, and the 4 of us all went to review the complaint. I thanked them for being so accommodating. I was worried I'd annoy them. Debbie took out the complaint, and all 3 of them went through it with me. Debbie looked homicidal. She clearly had anticipated firing me, or at least recommending me to be fired. The interview went something like this, and it took over half an hour, and they kept asking me the same questions but phrased different ways. So this is a really drastically condensed version. You said outside. You think Jill last name reported you? Why is this? Jill had an issue with me for about 3 months now. Why didn't you come to us when you realized Jill had an issue? I had no issue with her. What issue does Jill have with you? At this point, I explained my story about surgery, hating myself, scars, and getting my breast implants. All of this medical information which you have a copy of in my file, my full permission to review. Jill found out about my breast implants, but didn't know about the cancer. Jill had a problem with my breast implants and decided to communicate this problem with our co-workers. Why do you feel this is true? All from different co-workers, all testifying that Jill told the entire office that I'd had breast implants on the day she found out, and has since made comments about these implants frequently. They have quotes of what Jill said to them with the rough dates and times. Rough dates and times? No one knew this would be escalated to such an extent, so no one really took notes as to when it happened. What event or events do you think directly led to this complaint of harassment? For me, the harassment began when Jill told everyone about my breast implants without my consent, but as to the complaint placed against me, it would probably be what happened at about time yesterday in the lunchroom. Jill made a comment about me being shallow, while gesturing to my chest, and I replied giving her a very abrupt version of my medical history. There are cameras in the lunchroom, so I'm sure you'll be able to find the conversation. I'll admit I could have handled the situation better, but after 3 months I felt I had to put my foot down. Here's a list of names of the people who were also present. There were 6 people at the table, including myself and Jill. One of these people is also in these letters and has a written account of the conversation and signed it. Had you had a conversation with Jill prior to this regarding her comments about you? Several, spaced out over the last 3 months. Each time I communicated to her that I felt uncomfortable and upset with these comments she was making and would appreciate it if she were to stop. To your knowledge, was Jill made aware of your former cancer at any point in this time? No, it wasn't mentioned in the conversation with my friend that she overheard, and I didn't tell her because frankly it's none of her business, and I did not feel the need to detail my medical history to a co-worker in order to avoid further sexual harassment. The supervisor stands up and says, "Well, I think we're done here." He shakes my hand, sends me back to my desk, saying that I'd hear from them after they reviewed my evidence. Letters, CCTV, medical history, and anything they already had. And made a decision on the case. I returned to my desk, pulled up my CV, and prepared to start the job search again. About an hour goes by, and the person who wrote the letter and was there for the lunchroom interaction gets called for a meeting with HR. They come back about 10 minutes later, and they grab the next person. All the other people that were there in the lunchroom were one by one called up, stayed for about 10 minutes, returned to grab the next person, saying that HR wants to see them. Then the people who wrote letters but weren't there yesterday were also called one by one and are each gone about 10 minutes each, some longer, some shorter. By about 3:30 it looks like everyone who wrote a letter or was there in the lunchroom has been interviewed. Then, finally, Jill gets called in. She's gone for about 30 minutes and comes back fuming. She glares at me while I work, but I ignore her. 4:30ish, Jill gets called into HR again. 5 p.m. rolls around, everyone is either leaving or getting ready to leave when Jill storms back into the office. She glares at me the whole time. She packs up her desk. She then starts telling everyone who will listen that I got her fired before shoving her way onto the lift. Tough luck. An email comes in from HR. My case is closed. Personally, OP, I think you're very lucky that this turned out in your favor and you managed to so quickly get so many references from people. Like, paper trails do save the day sometimes. Like, if you didn't have that paper trail, you would have been fired pretty much straight away. You were as prepared as you could be, and you did a great job. You're so lucky this turned out in your favor, and I wish you the best with life, and I hope everything goes well for you. Anyway, this was a rather long story, so we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you once again for joining the AskR channel on r/ProRevenge. Thank you, goodbye, and see you next time.